So good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Journeys in Translation. I'm Yan Ying, Director of the Center for Translation and Interpreting Studies, University of Leicester. A few events have been organized around this remarkable project ever since its publication in 2015. And this is the third one, co-organized with our center here at Leicester. We held one in 2017, and then 3 years later, 2020, and yet another 3 years later, we are here again. So you can see the journeys in translation are still carrying on. So in the 2020 event 3 years ago, I remember I said that the poems have traveled far, and I'm sure there will be future ones. Now that the event is held today is also to mark 2023 International Translation Day. The theme, at this point, I would actually like to share a slide. If you can see the slide now, can you see the slide? Yeah. So that International Federation Translators, in this year, the theme is translation unveils the many faces of humanity. And I think I'm going to quote what they said in the article, which is very relevant to our theme today. So they say, thanks to their grounding studies in the humanities, translators and interpreters understand the deeper cultural and political issues and the issues of ethics, equity, and tolerance. So this is Saturday afternoon. We really appreciate your participation here. Now, well, there's still some structure with the event. This is largely, as I was saying earlier, quite conversational and informal. So if you feel you'd like to chip in the chat box, by all means. If you want to speak, please do raise your hands. This is just to avoid the echoes and things. And if you want to get up and have a drink, please do so. So without further ado, I will hand over to Ambrose, who is the initiator, founder, as well as the contributor of this project. He is going to talk briefly about the story of overland and oversea. Over to you, Ambrose.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jan, and thank you everyone who's gathered, who's joining us today, and also thank you to the poets and the translators. Journeys in translation wouldn't be possible, wouldn't have happened without people who speak other languages, who are giving their time, their skills, their attention to translating poems from overland, oversea into the languages that they speak. For me to talk about journeys in translation, I have to start with overland, oversea itself. Overland, oversea came about in 2015 in response to the crisis that we were seeing in how Europe was responding to how people were using the Mediterranean, especially to try and access places places where they could be safe. And Europe, especially politicians and also the media, they were using language that was really, really disturbing, dehumanizing, calling people waves, comparing them to insects, comparing them to invaders, and mainstream media was also doing more or less the same thing. There wasn't much pushback on the rhetoric and the discourses that that the politicians were using, which again, the media was reproducing. And yet, when you looked at what was happening on social media, for example, on Facebook, where in 2015 I used to spend a lot of time, I found that what people were saying on that platform and what people were saying in the newspapers and also what the politicians were saying, they were completely different. That is not to say there weren't people who were reproducing the problematic discourses. They were there, but what was also happening, which was not filtering into the media or into political discourse, was that actually, people who were watching these movements saw something else. They were talking about it in different terms. They acknowledged the humanity of the people who were making these impossible journeys, and they were reaching out in their own ways. Some were reaching out through the language that they were using to talk about what they were seeing. Others were organizing convoys, taking up collections, going to places like Calais in France and other informal refugee settlements that were in that country, and they were providing practical and material support so out of that realization, we suggested that maybe poets could put together an anthology that responds to the crisis, and that the anthology could be sold to raise funds for people who were seeking refuge and also for people who were making these impossible journeys. And out of that, we found a publisher, Five Leaves Publications, who generously, kindly agreed to publish the poems. We also had 3 seasoned poets who agreed to edit the anthology. And then once the anthology was published, every year from 2015 onwards, in Leicester, we tried to find different ways of promoting the anthology each year. And in one year, we selected, or poets offered their poems, and we turned them into postcards, which we gave out at the train station at Leicester. The reason why we chose the train station was because in previous years, Leicester train station had organized a number of literary events. So it was fitting that if they agreed, we could also host our own event around the postcards at the train station. And the other reason was that the train station was ideal because of how, especially in 2015, people, especially in mainland Europe, were using railway tracks a lot when they were traveling, moving from borders to countries that they thought they would be safe. And we called that initiative the Journeys Poem Pop-Up Library. And then the following year, we came up with Journeys in Translation as and there what we did is we, working with those same 14 poems, 14 of the 101 poems in the anthology. We took the poems to churches, we took them to community centers, we took them to libraries, we took them to the University of Leicester, and we encouraged people to have a go at translating the poems into other languages or into other art forms. And as a result of that effort, we found that by the end of the year, about 10% of the anthology had been translated into more than 20 languages, between 20 and 30 languages. And so we thought, okay, how about trying to get the whole anthology translated into other languages and then publishing them as translated editions, which is where Pietro De Andrea, who translated Overland Oversea into Italian, and also Monica Manolachi, who translated it into Bulgarian, into Romanian, came in. So currently, there are a number of people who are working on other translations. We've got people who are working on Arabic translations. Sarah is here, who will talk about that effort. We've also got people who are working on French and also Shona translations. I don't know if Tavengwa is in yet, but once he comes in, he'll be able to talk about the effort to translate Overland Oversea into Shona. So without more from me, I'll leave this here, and then maybe we go to Monica.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. It's nice to hear you again, to see you again. I'll say a few words about this project, how I learned about it. Can you hear me? Yes, okay. And what stages we went through and how we got to what we have now. First of all, I heard about journeys in translation in 2017. A friend from Scotland, the poet Neil Leadbeater, told me about this project, and I had a go and translated some of the poems. It was the second semester with first-year students, and the students were glad to work on the poems, and we translated them into Romanian. So some of them were published not only on the blog of Journeys in Translation, but also in some Romanian literary magazines focused on translation or on cultural issues. And it was interesting that in the classroom, while translating the poems, the students, we realized that some of the students came from migrant families. So they were either born in other countries, they were Romanians or half Romanians or not Romanians. So they could relate more to this activity, and they were more convinced that translation is important. Before moving on, I'd like to say that in 2017, the Romanian Coalition for the Rights of Migrants and Refugees was established in Romania. It is a coalition of many of the NGOs and the institutions, public institutions that deal with these problems. And in the next year, the next academic year, 2018 and 2019, I decided to translate the whole book, and the poems were distributed to students again from the first year, and they had the possibility to choose what they could translate. You know that if you don't know the anthology, there are some poems that are easier to translate, some others that are more difficult to translate. We, of course, commented on the voice of the poem, on the message that they transmit. And in parallel with the translation of the poems, we also read and translated and discussed articles from the news, from newspapers, from magazines that presented migrants and refugees in a different light, so they could see the different discourses. And two key questions that we discussed in the seminars were what migrants come to Romania, and what migrants and to which countries, or where do migrants from Romania go. So in this way, we problematized this idea that Romania is just a country where people come from, a country where migrants don't stay, or something like that. Throughout these discussions, which somehow I repeat every year, throughout these discussions, we realized that Romania is not only a source of migrants, but also a destination. And I hope working on these poems and this kind of literary productions, we can consolidate this idea and become more, how to say, responsible for what is happening in this domain. Let me see what I wanted to say. Last year we published the book into Romanian. It is available on Amazon, and I hope that in the future it will be used in other contexts, like schools or creative workshops of creative writing, and workshops organized by local NGOs. It's a bit difficult because in Romanian society, this is not very common to use literature, poems in NGOs. So because of the language barrier, this is one thing that needs to be addressed more. But I hope that little by little, the attitudes towards how people can get involved in these issues will, how to put it, will become more diverse. So yes, if you have questions, of course, I'm here to answer. And I want to say that last year I gave an interview to a friend who lives in Norway. So he has this multicultural experience from another perspective. And the interview was published in Romanian. And in this interview, I explained again what we are doing, what we have done, and in this way we have a kind of model that can be maybe applied, replicated in other contexts.
Yeah, thank you very much, Monica. You did a very, very exciting job.
Thank you.
And I think what I learned from you is that you actually got the students involved and got the students to reflect on their own experience, maybe their family's experience as well.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you.
Maybe we'll also hear from Saha and Christophe, who are also translating the anthology, and Tavengwa, if he's in, before we go to the readings and the translations.
Maybe Saha first. Saha, would you like to say something? You are muted. Yeah.
Yeah, I just thought I would wait for the cue first. Well, thank you so much, first of all, for presenting us with this type of opportunity. I think one of the key elements of translation is trying to bring people together, and I honestly could not think of a much more productive endeavor through which we actually put our creative energies to bring people together. So I think I heard about the anthology itself early in 2021, if I'm not mistaken, through a colleague at Queen's University of Peste, a PhD student as well. And as a person who I'm a translator, but I am mostly a poet. My allegiance is to poetry more than translation, I must admit. So I thought it was a great opportunity to just kind of merge the two activities together. And you know, the subject itself of refugees and activism somehow became inseparable to the identity of being an Arab the past decade or so, I have to admit. And so I think I proposed the idea of presenting or just, you know, translating a number of poems, but I think Ambrose was kind enough to suggest that I take a little bit more time with it and present this to other people. And since I'm currently based in Belfast, where I'm doing my PhD, so I'm a little bit outside my own personal element and my connections. But I think that I found the exact right people who would be interested in the topic and in the translation itself. So my contributors are mainly colleagues, PhD students, individuals who also experienced being refugees, who have very, I think, profound personal connection to the subject matter itself. And so we've been working on this for, I think, a little bit more over a year. And it's coming, it's shaping up really nicely, I have to say. And I have been having conversations with people at the authority of charge of publication because I intend to also do something with the anthology once it's actually ready and we can, you know, bring more awareness of this particular matter in the Middle East and North Africa region as well, where there's an ample, the plethora of resources that, in my opinion, can be utilized for the cause. And so it has been kind of eye-opening to just see how, first of all, how poetry is received and how translations are perceived. But it's nothing new really. But once you put all the knowledge into the real world, it's been a bit of an ebb and flow, sort of a rocky journey so far. But we're persevering. We're trying to get through. But I think that's all I really have to say. But I'm really looking forward to see how the whole anthology comes together.
Yeah, we are really looking forward to hearing your reading of your translation.
Oh, me too.
Good. And Christopher, sorry, not Christopher. Correct me. I maybe have pronounced
Christophe, no, that's
yeah.
That's absolutely fine. Thank you. I'm very pleased to be here today. It's the first time I participate in one of these events. I think I'm only at the start of the journey. I was contacted a few months ago by Ambrose, and I think that was possibly in last October. And I teach at Cambridge University. I teach on undergraduate courses. I teach translation from and into French. So I thought it would be a great opportunity. Translating the poetry would be a great opportunity for class activities, meaningful class activities. So I was immediately interested in the project, and I think Ambrose mentioned the rhetoric of the media, what we heard in the mainstream media from 2015 and onwards, and still to this day. And to me, this poetry and the act of translating is really a kind of antidote against that contamination we get from the media or politicians. And so I thought it would be very interesting to take time to focus on the words of the poets. I had a few sessions with students last year where we initially I thought we would be quite quick in translating these poems, or I tend to be of an optimistic nature, so I thought, they're good students, they're motivated, they will engage with this, and it will be quite quick. And We ended up actually, I mean, I don't know how many we've translated, or but probably a dozen, or less than 15. We actually spent a lot of time discussing the poems and discussing the issues at stake as well, and which was great. I mean, I thought it was actually worth taking time with them to talk about these issues, and some had personal connections with the issues discussed, presented in the poems, and others didn't. And this year, I think I'm going to approach it slightly differently. I might try and suggest to them to translate the poems very quickly and then have the discussions, rather than try and discuss first and then translate, or discuss as we translate. So I might perhaps produce a few translations quickly myself, and then we'll work from that. And sometimes that's an easier way of working with students, editing perhaps, rather than creating a text together. As I mean, this is something. It's an extracurricular activity. I mean, I teach translations, and my students take exams in translation, but we don't ask them to translate poetry. So that's something we do as an extracurricular activity, which obviously, as there are time constraints, or I can't ask too much of them, sadly. But I'm hoping that by the end of the academic year, we might have something for Ambrose to finished set of poems for the whole anthology. Yeah, so I'll stop there for now, but thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, I think what you mentioned about students discovers their personal connection with the poem is through the act of translation. It's really interesting. Again, it resonates with what Monica was saying earlier. And I think that Ambrose and Monica co-wrote an article about translation as activism, right? Maybe Ambrose, do you want to say a couple of words about it? How translation, or Monica? Sorry, I'll let you decide who would like to speak on this.
Monica, do you want to start?
You start first, and I'll say a few words later.
Yeah.
Okay.
So how I got involved is that Monica is a translator. I'm more. What am I? I'm more of a poet, activist kind of person, and Monica is the person who's got like the practical translation skills. So I think she was invited to a conference in Canada, and after that conference, where we spoke together in the same panel about journeys in translation. And then after that, we were invited to submit an article on the work that we've been doing. All of us, we are all in this together. So what we decided to do was to write about translation from our perspective, the way that we see it, the way that we see overland, oversea, and journeys in translation is trying to do, which is to intervene in the discourses that are taking place around migration, and using poetry and translation as the vehicle of that intervention. I think, Monica, is there anything you want to add?
Yes, I would like to mention an idea that we put into that article, and somehow is more connected with what happens in Romania. Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. The idea is that a part of the intellectuals, a part of the writers, the cultural commentators, consider resistance through culture as something positive. And in our article, we show that through translation, we don't merely resist through culture, but we transform the culture in ways that we need as a society in order to keep the balance between cultures, let's say. Okay, so this was what I wanted to say about that. Thank you.
And also one of the other things that we touched on is how in most countries, when people think of migration, they think of people, they think of numbers, they think of food, they think of art, but very few think about the languages that people move with them when they travel. So I live in Leicester, and in Leicester, I'm acutely aware. Leicester is the first plural city in Europe, possibly, where there's no one group that forms more than 51% of the population. So there are the hundreds of languages that are spoken here. So we tapped into that in the first iteration of Journeys in Translation. And we found it exciting that we've got all these languages in this really, really small place called Leicester, small physically, as in, and also, yeah, and we wanted to work with that to see what we could find, what happens when you present these poems to people and encourage them to play with them, to do things with them, to transform them, to transform them, change them, own them, personalize, Yeah, so that's what we tried to do. And also the other point from my perspective, where in Britain, the assumption is that Britain, people in Britain speak English. That is true, yes, but they speak other languages as well. And in my view, I thought, all those other languages are just as important and significant as English, which is the one of the main languages that are spoken in this country. So we wanted to get, all of those things into play. And I think we did something novel, Monica and I. We framed translation as recreation, as something that people do for fun. I don't think that has been in the literature on translation that much. So we put the idea in there. And in our definition of recreation, we drew on a definition that was offered by folk in Canada who looked at that as well. And the activism, I think that is clear. And there's also an assumption that activism is something to be shied away from, but I fundamentally disagree with that. I think it is human to try and change systems, environments, structures that are not working, that are harming people, which is what Journeys in Translation is trying to do, which is also what Overland Oversea is trying to do. And we take we take an interesting approach to activism, where we say, when you're active, you're an activist. It's just a scale. It's just a matter, a question of the extent to which you are active in trying to bring about the change that you see as necessary. For me, I see changing the discourse on migration is absolutely essential. A lot of harm is being done in the name of defending borders. People are being sacrificed at the border for a construct that is meant to save people. I think people are more important than borders. This is coming from me. This is a view that I have. Borders are important, yes. Nations, nationality, nationhood, they're important. But in all that, I think we have to put people first. People are important, and people should be allowed to live. They should not be left to drown. They should not be left to die at borders. They should not be brutalized in immigration detention centers or in asylum systems. We have an obligation, a duty to each other as human beings.
Thank you, Ambrose. So we can see, yeah, translation is an activist in a way. It can transcend borders. And also, as Ambrose mentioned, it's fun. On this note, we have designed a little exercise, especially for those who haven't really done much translation before, but who have different language skills. So now you can access this document. On page 8, there's a very short poem and written by Ambrose. So very short. We'll give you about 5 minutes to try your hand and see what can you come up with. So we have seen, in our chat box, people have all sorts of languages, very exciting. Lithuanian, Korean, French, what else? Arabic, of course. There are many others, I guess. So, 5 minutes, and then we'll come back, and then we're going to do some readings. And to end the event, we are going to invite you who have just translated this poem and see if you would like to share your translation. That's a good point. Yes, please. Thank you, Ziba. That's a good idea. Yeah, Ambrose, could you please actually read?
Yes. So the man who ran through the tunnel. So before I read, I'll give the context. So in 2015, was it 2015? Somewhere near there was this story of a man who walked from Calais to Dover, who walked through the Channel Tunnel, and was in Dover when he was found. And when the newspapers were reporting on it, again, they were using this language of it being an invasion, that there was a breach, really, really disturbing language. But when I looked at and listened to what was happening, I saw and they had completely different things. So this poem is a reflection on that. And the title is The Man Who Ran Through the Tunnel. When I heard how he ran across continents, over rivers, through forests, through deserts, and through tunnels, how could I fail to be inspired? I'll read that again because my camera was turned off. So when I heard how he ran across continents, over rivers, through forests, through deserts, and through tunnels, how could I fail to be inspired?
Excellent. I think all have completed the task. So maybe we can move on to the reading now. Ambrose, what do you think?
Maybe before we go to the readings, we hear from Tavengwa, who's just joined us, who's translating into Shona.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you for letting me in. The network is tricky. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, but there's quite a bit of background noise.
And also, you're too close to the camera.
Yeah, I'm actually in a public internet cafe, so the noise can be.
Okay. But that's fine.
So, but I can read, since it's a short poem, I'll read my translation now.
Before you read your translation, maybe you could talk about you know, how you came to Journeys in Translation and how you are finding the exercise, and also which languages you're translating into.
Journeys in Translation, I started it from the point of the title of my anthology, Sheru, which means a game of tale. You guys there in Leicester actually translated my poem, Benyambira, at one of your gatherings somewhere around in 2016. So I took it as my turn now. When the offer to translate Journeys in Translation, I mean, to translate overland overseas. At this point in time, I've completed all the 110 poems. And I'm actually on the point of trying to hook up with the individual writers so that I can iron out some local languages that I come across, like, you know, Yala, I would want to know what Yala is. Balaika, I would want to know what Balaika means. So, Ambrose's poem is also featured in my poetry collection called Jisheru. So I've translated this poem way back in around in 2017. So I think is that Iraqi lady. Her name is actually, I also translated a poem which is Children of War. It is also featured in my book. And so I'll go on to read Shona, a translation of Ambrose, the man who ran through the channel. Murume akavanga mumuparo. Pandakanzwa nemashamwaridzano akaita nemhepo, achidanha nzizi, kugura masango, kucheka nemugwenga, nekutukutira nemuparo. Kwandiri yakava ngoma yevashawasha, ndaigutadza nei kusudza. That's the translation. Hello.
Thank you very much, Tavengwa. Thank you. Yeah, and over to you, Jan. You're mute.
Sorry, I meant to clap my hands. I was looking for the clapping hands, not hand raising them. Yeah, that sounds beautiful. I just want to ask Tavengwa about you know, the consideration he had when translating the poem. And maybe you could remind the audience here the language. I might have missed that part.
Yeah, the language here is Shona, which is one of the major languages in Zimbabwe, actually, which is actually the most widely spoken local language is Shona, followed by Ndebele, of course. But Shona, it has got about 6 dialects, official dialects, yet it is about 30 to 40 something dialects if you look at them closely. So, like, we had a problem of Shona being generalized. And most of the minority dialects were being forced into umbrella names like Chizezura or Chimanyika, whereby you are taking the Ndau people, you are talking about the Maungwe people, and you are just grouping them all like Chimanyika, yet they are different. Even in Mutaren, you go to Bocha, you see people speaking or hear them speaking Chijindwi, but it is called Chimanyika. So there is need, like the Ndaus have done now, they've broken out of Shona. They're saying, no, our language is not Shona because we've got terms that do not come in the structure of Shona, like Mpakati. Some of their languages they will go on to feature languages of the Nguni, like beyond the borders into South Africa. Yet we're trying to force them into those called Chikanda Mazeko. Ambrose will know that what you mean. So there is need for actually trying to highlight these languages. I think I'll try one day. I'll try and do the Manyika translation, the Ndau translation, the Jindwi translation, and it will. The Korikores actually would want also to be featured. So, like on the choice of words, I actually read the poem and read it aloud, and then tried to get, the rhythm of the poem. And I wanted every line to be the step or that boot stepping on the ground, like Pandakans one. And it's one leg going Pandakans. Pandakans, mashamaridzirano akaita nemhepo achidana nzizi kugura masango kucheka nemugwenga nekutukutira nemumuparo kwandiri yakave ngoma yevashawasha ndaigotadza nei isusu. There is a key on the third line from the last, which say kwandiri yakave ngoma yevashawasha. Ambrose did not actually put that in his poem, but I wanted to show how he was inspired. Actually, he's from the Shawasha people. His totem is Mreo. So I just thought of incorporating his totem into the poem to see how that drum, ngoma is drum in Shona, how that drum beat of those Shawasha people who make Ambrose actually being inspired, like being possessed by a spirit. I think that's how I came to translate the poem, which is the reason why I want to speak with the individual poets, so that I could get the background of what inspired them to come up with the translation. Of course, I've done the preliminary translations, but I want to get the grip of what the poets, of what actually drove them to write those poems. Thank you.
That's really fascinating. Thank you so much. Tavengwa, forgive my pronunciation, may not be right. Ambrose, as poet,
Yes.
how would you like to respond? And the particularly interesting point for me is about the recreation of the rhythm and the addition. Yeah.
So when I heard Tavengwa's translation first time, I was impressed. I think he actually improved the poem. He turned a poem that was, in English into a Shona poem, and he wrote it the way that a Shona poet would write it. And I thought that was absolutely brilliant. It was actually really, really beautiful and wonderful to see that transformation. And I'm absolutely delighted with the way Tavengwa has done it.
To hear. It's excellent for us to hear the sound of the reading. That's beautiful. Maybe we can move on to other poems, shall we? And we'll save the translation of this poem from participants a bit later as the ending residence, if I may say. So next reading. Ambrose, would you like to suggest something? Shall we follow the order in the brochure or in the handout?
Yeah, yeah.
So we have for Richard, my neighbor, right?
Yes.
Richard, would you like to read your poem, please?
Yes, certainly. And just to say thank you to both Ambrose and Jan for having me here today. And thank you to all the translators. I'm afraid I don't speak any languages, and so this is a real learning experience for me, and thank you all very much. So this poem is about stereotypes, and I have a background in mental health nursing and also social sciences, and so I'm very interested in why people believe what they believe, and how when we get to know people, our rather rigid beliefs about them may change. And this is what this poem is about. My neighbour. My new neighbour, Ahmed, seems an okay guy. He volunteers for Age UK, shows me pics of his wife and kids, talks about the band he plays in, how he hopes to make the big time. Then this morning, he tells me he's a refugee. And we all know they're all illegals. We all know they come in swarms, surges, floods, swamp our NHS, take our women, houses, jobs. So how come Ahmed seems to be an okay guy when he's a refugee? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Richard. That's really fascinating, and it gets us to think, you know, what the kind of assumptions and the stereotypes we have in our mind. Any responses from our audience?
Maybe after Richard reads after the poets read in English, we hear the translators.
Yeah.
Maybe we hear the poem in English and then Romanian, Arabic.
Excellent.
Shona.
So we have for any translation ready for Richard's poem here? Yeah,
I
excellent,
could
Monica.
I could read it in Romania. Yes, okay.
The booklet.
Good,
Please,
because
Monica.
it's here. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. Vecinul meu. Noul meu vecin, Ahmad, pare un tip de treabă. E voluntar la Age UK, îmi arată poze cu soția și copiii, vorbește despre trupa în care cântă, despre cum speră să dea lovitura. Apoi, în dimineața asta, îmi spune că e refugiat. Și cu toții știm că sunt cu toții clandestini, cu toții știm că vin în grupuri, valuri, ne inundă, ne falimentează sistemul de sănătate, ne iau femeile, casele, slujbele. Deci cum poate Ahmed să pară un tip de treabă când el este refugiat? O traducere de Oana Drăgoșin, a translation by Oana Drăgoșin, one of my students. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica. That sounds like a great improvement, I think. Thank you.
Yes.
Thanks.
Can I ask a question first? Just take advantage of me being kind of sharing a little bit. How the UK, NHS, all these references, are they kept or they moved on to Romanian kind of equivalents, if I may say so?
No, we kept the British institutions because we don't have something similar here. Well,
good. Yeah. So anybody else would like to respond to the translation or the poem or?
Oh, yes, sorry. NHS, yes, that was translated. It was the health system. So, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, so NHS is translated as a health system.
Yes. I know NHS is an institution in the UK, but in Romania, I wanted to put something more general that includes the institution, the public institutions, and the other institutions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes, Barbara, please.
Just to respond to the poem, it's quite hopeful in a way, because the very fact that someone like that is questioning it, is something that you don't often see. There's usually an entrenched position, but you never know. Sometimes people change, when they start talking about it, they actually think, oh, so this is hopeful.
And I think there is some research by social psychologists which suggests that the more you get to know a group of people who are stereotyped, the more likely it is that some people, depending on their personalities, may actually change their position. But of course, there's wide variation with that.
All right, thank you, Richard. And thank you, Barbara, as well. Maybe let's move on to the next poem.
Thank you for those responses. Thank you.
Carrie Featherstone's What We Know. Do we have the poet here?
Hi, guys.
Hello.
Hello, nice to be here. Yeah, a little introduction to this is that as part of my job at Loughborough University, I have researched and taught a lot about Afghanistan and the relationship between Afghanistan and the West, particularly the way that the West has, that Afghanistan has been treated by the British. And at that period that Ambrose was talking about earlier, I was particularly angry about the way in which stereotypes about Afghanistan were being sort of promoted. And I, in my teaching, always tried to present alternative viewpoints of Afghanistan and the way that that country operates and its landscapes. And so that's what I tried to bring some of that specificity instead of stereotypes into this. So it's called What We Know. This is what I know. We walked across Gore to Farah, and then through Turkmenistan, around the Black Sea, the Caspian, into a wall-marked Europe. We cheated the borders of Hungary. I know friends in the camp who choked in lorries across 1,000 miles into Italy without a word. I know that this camp is on flat land above the sea, full of gulls and tourists who can choose to ignore the heavy steel temptation of a dark tunnel and its trains. I know that call. This is what you do not know. The soft valleys of the Gore, high mountains around the hometown of Chagcharan, carpet weavers who cannot read a word but surely make threads sing, a woman taking the place of a man driving a car. You do not know our radio, the voice of peace. Here is my son, Amal, who must keep bloody secrets, and my wife. You do not know how a man outside the camp at Songat knocked my phone to the floor as it rang. My wife. You do not know these people.
I could translate this into Romanian. Shall I read it? Yes, okay. The title is Ce știm? Asta e ce știu eu. Am trecut prin Gor, spre Farah și apoi prin Turkmenistan, pe lângă Marea Caspică, Marea Neagră, spre un zid pe care scria Europa. Am scăpat de granița cu Ungaria. Știu prieteni din lagăr care s-au sufocat în camioane după 1000 de mile de drum spre Italia, fără o vorbă. Știu că lagărul acesta e pe un teren de câmpie deasupra nivelului mării, plin de pescăruși, de turiști, care pot alege să ignore tentația puternică, tare ca oțelul a unui tunel întunecos, cu trenuri. Știu chemarea aceea. Asta e ce tu nu știi, văile blânde ale Gorului, munții înalți din jurul orașului meu natal, Kahkaran. Țesătoarele de covoare care nu știu deloc să citească, dar sigur pot face firul să cânte. O femeie care ia locul unui bărbat și conduce o mașină. Nu ne cunoști posturile de radio, glasul păcii. Aici e fiul meu, Aimal, care trebuie să păstreze secrete sângeroase, și soția mea. Nu știi cum un om din afara lagărului de la Sangate mi-a aruncat telefonul pe jos când suna. Soția mea, nu-i cunoști pe acești oameni. A translation made by Naomi Tudor, a student. Thank you. I really like this poem. So congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Gary.
That's amazing.
Any other responses? What I actually want to ask is about the pronouns used, the perspective used here. You know, I, we, and how, you know, how Carrie, when you wrote this poem, what you have in mind. And Monica, maybe I'm not sure you can speak for your student, but how you as a tutor, how did you respond to that point about, you know, pronouns used in the poem?
I was deliberately changing the pronouns because I wanted to have a first stanza which was mostly I, and then a second stanza that was mostly you. And I think by the end of the poem, the you is really speaking to kind of a British person who doesn't really understand either the homeland or the experience of leaving it, because there's a kind of double level of ignorance. One is that they're ignorant of Afghanistan, but the second is that they're ignorant of what that experience of being in the camp is like, because they literally don't know the people involved on either side, but they're still kind of, yeah, still claiming knowledge despite the fact that they don't really have any.
I really like this two perspectives set in contrast, and it makes you think that there is not only one perspective about things. So there is always another story, other stories that. Yeah, so it's about the danger of how was that the danger of the only story of how was that that speech by the American writer. I don't remember her name now. I'm sorry, but yes, it's about different perspectives.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then now the translation has brought into yet another perspective, and that's fascinating about the translation, I think. Any other responses? Oh, and any other translation of this poem? No, okay. If that's the case, let's move on. We have Anne Holloway again tonight. Do we have the poet here? No? Do we have
Among
the
the poets, we've got Kerry, we've got Kevin, we've got Laila, Richard, and Ziba.
Okay, so if that case, shall we'll keep the poems here, but we perhaps will move on to the poems with poets here, with the poets here. So, you know, you can hear the poets read their poems and have a bit better feel, and as well as a background story. We have Kevin.
Hi, yes, I'm here. I don't know if my camera is working though.
Yeah, it's okay. We can hear you, but I can hear my voice echoing.
Okay, that's great. And it's wonderful to be part of this dialogue. I'm very fascinated by what a poem is. And one way to explore that is by contrasting it with translations and learning through that process, how much is specific to the poem and how much is culturally referenced. I'm a queer person, and I write poems which sometimes invite people to step into the shoes of queer people. And so for my contribution to this anthology, I stepped into the shoes of a refugee who had actually made it to this country and what that might be like. It's called Last Rain of the Season. Each empty chair greeted with that sort of touch kept for a childhood pony. Paintbrushes propped in an old honeypot to flower again. The key is heavy, heavy and cold. She turns thoughts to the light pounding at the window for admission or forgiveness, and with a prayer steadies to another day. A snail on the doorstep. She moves it gently, so very gently away.
Thank you, Kevin. Can we have translations then? We have for Romanian read.
Yeah, I could try read that in Romanian.
Please.
Ultima ploaie a anotimpului. Fiecare scaun gol atins cu acel gest din copilărie cu care te apropiai de ponei, pensule de vopsea proptite într-un vechi borcan de miere ca să înflorească din nou. Cheia este grea, grea și rece. Femeia stă și se gândește în lumina care bate prin fereastră. Recunoaștere sau iertare și cu o rugăciune se liniștește pentru încă o zi. Un melc pe pragul ușii îl urnește ușor, atât de ușor. Translation by Alessandra Arsene. Thank you. A very subtle poem.
Thank you. I think Saha is saying, oh, I'm currently working on this poem. It's not ready yet, but do you want to share your draft anyway?
It's in the process of brainstorming how I'm going to go about it.
Okay.
So this was a privileged experience to hear it being read by the poet.
Yeah, do you have any responses? Do you want to, ask questions? Maybe it's a good chance to get to the poet's, feedback or some thoughts.
I think I'm the type of person who is usually drawn to what I like to call very soft power. Not in that sense, but in the sense that it can some things. The less we aggrandize them, the more powerful they are, at least in my perspective. So I think The Last Train of the Season was one of those poems, I think, in my opinion. There is, it's one of those poems that I think you can can read it in whichever way, depending on what stage of life you are in. It doesn't necessarily resonate simply as something that has to do with activism or with that one specific cause, which I think is where the beauty of it lies. So props to you, Kevin. I think I might reach out, who knows, with my questions once I actually start the writing process, but it's a very beautiful poem.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Monica, would you like to say something about the translation?
I'm not sure because it was translated by a student, but I wanted to say that it is a subtle poem, and it's not only about refugees, about migrants, it's about feelings, and it can be interpreted in various ways. So
Yeah,
this is
true.
the beauty of it. It's not addressing the problems, the social problems directly, but indirectly.
Yeah, absolutely. I loved these lines, 2 lines. Paintbrushes propped in an old honey pot to flower again. That's so beautiful. Okay, thank you. Any other translations ready here? If not, maybe we'll move on.
Read it in Romanian if you want. Yeah.
Yeah, go on. Maybe whilst we wait. Yeah. Otherwise, there will be some awkward silence. So yeah, please.
This is a powerful poem. I hope I can render it in the Romanian with the same strength.
So you have actually translated it yourself?
Just a moment. I think no, somebody else, but maybe I worked on it to shape it a little, to give it a better shape. Divan pe ninsoare. În noaptea aceea sunt cel mai curt farzad, de la forfota nașterii mele până la mâna mâinilor mele care spun nu, de la 2 degete ridicate, degetul mic și degetul mare, din pumn, din jaf, dintre toți îngerii de 5, 50, 50 de mii, 50 de milioane, cea mai curdă lună plină din a 14-a noapte. Inima tremură, buzele uscate tremură, plumbul din pieptul cu glonte tremură, paloarea de pe chipul tău tremură. Nu ai nici mamă, nici soră, nici casă în care să fie aruncat, nici prieten care să lovească scaunul spânzurătorii, nici trăgaci în buzunar s-a descusut căptușeala, nici măcar un giulgiu în care să te îngroape, nici o casă a sângelui, nici vorbă, nu ai nici măcar nu mai ai nici măcar umbră, n-ai, tu nu ai. Ochii îngrijorați ca 2 ferestre, căldura unor mici focuri și candelabre dincolo de toate ferestrele. Știu cum că te îngrijorează balconul, divanul care s-a dus să se culce sub zăpezi și a înnebunit. Masa care s-a așezat sub zăpadă ca să nu pară goală, femeia căreia i-a albit părul pieptănându-se în ninsoare. Turna cu poezie atât de pură încât i-a pierit zăpezii albul. Singurătatea unghiilor înnegrite și crăpate, rănile deschise pe sub cămăși sfâșiate, singurii martori la clipele de șchiopătare a pistolului care aleargă la rond după calul unui imam și sfârșește sub căruciorul unui magazin de legume și fructe. Moartea s-ar înneca în propriul lac de fină sudoare, dar avea picioare, moartea aceasta ar fugi, de-ar fi om și dar avea cap, s-ar da cu capul de un arbore sau ca un poet străin și-ar face din antebraț o balalaică și-ar cânta la ea sub zăpadă, balalaica, 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 laica, lai, halai, lalai, lalai, acum dori moțule. Translation by Bianca Namur.
Ziva, can you mute yourself? Maybe we can hear you now.
Well, whilst Ziba is trying to, I will try my Shona attempt on that poem, Diwani Under Snow.
Yeah, go on. Yeah, go on, Shona first. We'll see if Ziba can sort out the issue.
Yeah, really, I would have loved to speak to it before I read poem, but as matter stands, I will just go on. Diwani Mufukore Chando. Usiku unoondika kubva pazindakupa excuse me. Right, I'll start again. Usiku uno ndini kadhesi fadhazi kubva pazindakupa ndakutorera rekubarwa kwangu kusvika pakusimudzwa kweruoko kwemaoko wangu, kubva pakumisa minwe miviri kasiyanwa uye hwekutanga chibhakera, pakati pengirozi dzose dzechishanu dzemakumi mashanu nezviuru makumi mashanu nemamiliyoni makumi mashanu, usiku hwegumi usiku hwegumi nerima wejena guru excuse me. I think I will have to let this go because I wrote it in ink, so when the light is not so clear, I'm not able to read, which is in ink. I'll try something that is typed later on.
We can still get a sense, despite on my end, it sounds a bit broken, maybe a bit disruption in the connection, but still we can have a sense of what it sounds like in Shona, definitely. I'm a bit conscious of the time here. Maybe we can carry on with a couple more poets that are here. I think and we have Ambrose and we have Nasri. I think she may not be here. And we have Laila. Laila, please.
So we've got Laila and Barbara.
Hi, is there a preference which one I could read? Which one has a translation? I have Landing on Lampedusa and Please Look After This Bear. Which one should I read? Which one do we have?
That's a good point.
Translations for? I'll just pick one.
Do we have Shona for either of the two poems here? Arabic not ready yet, but we know we have Romanian, that's for sure. Monica, would you suggest either one or anything? Laila, you choose, you pick.
Yes, Laila picks the one she likes.
I will go for Please Look After This Bear. So this poem was inspired from a photo of a park in Budapest where there was just loads of children's toys in a park where sanctuary seekers had been sleeping before the last train left to leave the country, basically. So it's from the perspective of a bear, and the other one was the perspective of a turtle. So I wanted to take non-human perspectives for these poems. Thank you. Please look after this bear. In a Budapest park today, the bears woke alone. Only a stray sock and sweet wrapper to remember their carers by. Dust, sea salt and sand crossed their hobbled paws, arms droop from walks longer than their Chinese stitches had prepared them for. Their cocoa, pink and honey coats are grobbily fading from all they have pillowed and heard, before ears were left on razor wire at the Serbian border. Their soft labels with faint instructions were twisted through fingers in lines that stretched to forever and back again, till there was nothing left about hand washing at 30 degrees and never tumble drying polyester. Nothing printed in all these warnings about keeping all bears a safe distance from sarin gas, barrel bombs and shrapnel. Their eyes were sewn and re-sewn from many a mother's hem to stop the smaller world collapsing. And now they watch cameras snatching the park at dawn whilst the last train heaves. The bears gaze out through screens and papers, surrounded by headlines screaming panic or pity, straining to see where their children have gone. Thank you.
Again, a very powerful poem, which I was pleased to translate myself. Vă rog, aveți grijă de acest urs. Astăzi, într-un parc din Budapesta, urșii s-au trezit singuri. Doar o șosetă răzleață și o folie de bomboană ne amintesc de îngrijitorii lor. Praful, sarea de mare și nisipul le rămân pe labe când șchioapătă. Le cad brațele obosite de la mersul pe jos. Un drum mai lung decât pot rezista plasturilor chinezești. Blănița lor cafenie, roz sau aurie se murdărește jerpelindu-se, de la cât se rează și de la tot ce aud, iar mai înainte și-au lăsat urechile în sârma ghimpată de la granița cu Serbia. Etichetele cu instrucțiuni aproape șterse au fost răsucite între degete la cozile care se întindeau până la infinit și înapoi, până când nu mai rămânea nimic din spălatul de mână la 30 de grade și din nu centrifugați niciodată poliesterul. Nu scria nimic pe etichetă despre cum trebuie ținuți urșii la distanță față de gazul sarin, de explozibil și șrapnel. Ochii le-au fost cusuți și răscusuți cu ață din tivul mamei, pentru ca lumea celor mici să nu se năruie. Iar acum urmăresc camerele de filmat cum prind ele imagini cu parcul în zori, în timp ce ultimul tren se depărtează greoi. Urșii se uită în jur, privesc la ecrane și ziare înconjurați de titluri de șchioapă, țipând panicați sau cu milă, străduindu-se să afle încotro s-au dus copiilor. Very beautiful poem. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was beautiful to hear. Thank you.
Monica, can I quickly ask, what is the most challenging thing in translating this particular poem?
Now I can't remember the exact details, but I can relate to the atmosphere that the poem represents. I visited Budapest. I lived in Budapest at some point because I studied Hungarian some years ago as a student, and I can relate to this feeling of being there as a foreigner. Yeah.
Thank you, Laila. Thank you, Monica. maybe we can move on to next poet, and we have Barbara here. Barbara, would you?
Sure.
Please.
Okay, so my poem records one of thousands of traumatic sea crossings by refugees in small boats. The poem follows the same structure as a wonderful poem by George Mackay Brown, who was one of Scotland's great 20th century poets. In his poem and mine, a teacher's voice frames the narrative of a child's description of a memorable journey. George Mackay Brown's child describes a fair. But anyway, and the teacher's voice is in complete contrast with the child's voice. Both teachers show an incredible inability to grasp what the child is describing or to respond to the child empathetically. George Mackay Brown's poem is set in the early 20th century, and the children write on slates, you know, little blackboards with chalk. And after criticizing their work, George Mackay Brown's teacher tells the children to wipe their slates clean. And in a way, she completely denigrates the children. In my poem, the teacher's voice is more polite, perhaps more middle class, but it shows it's mechanical, it's indifferent, it's unempathetic. The teacher asks the whole class to check spelling, punctuation, and grammar, something I've done myself many, many times as a teacher, I have to admit. And it's followed by this wonderful description by the child. I don't mean it's wonderful because I mean it's terrible, it's wonderful, it's completely in contrast with the child, with the teacher. And the teacher's cliched response afterwards seems to show a failure to grasp the enormity of the child's trauma. So the poem is called A Memorable Journey, and it's after a poem called The Horse Fair by George Mackay Brown. Today, you are going to write about an exciting or memorable journey. Remember to check your work for spelling, punctuation, and grammar. I went to the beach. We left our dog for the day with my aunt. I sat in a boat beside my mum, dad, and little brother. Dad gave money to a man. The boat was crowded. Mums, dads, babies, grandparents. We watched the waves. We heard wailing and crying. Night was cold and windy. The smell of diesel and fish blew all over the ship. The man wore a baseball cap. He took off with the crew. He struck a hammer in my heart. The rescue, the whole boat tipped over at the rescue. I held on by my nails. Men climbed out of the sea. Someone shouted at me, "Are you dead or alive?" The moon was gone. My brother was gone and I was dead. But they picked me out of the sea. Now I am in this country. Fantastic effort. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you so much, Barbara. I feel, you know, you put yourself in the voice of this child in such a empathizing process of writing this poem. So do we have the translation here, Shona? I know we have Romanian and So my thinking is, my kind of understanding is the translation itself is another process of being sympathetic. Not just sympathetic, I think I should be empathetic towards the experience described in the poem. Can we have Monica again, if you don't mind?
Sure, of course. Just a moment. O călătorie memorabilă, de Barbara Saunders, după poemul Târgul de Cai de George Mackay Brown. Astăzi veți scrie despre o călătorie palpitantă sau memorabilă. Nu uitați să verificați ortografia, punctuația și gramatica. Ne-am dus la plajă. În ziua aia am lăsat câinele cu mătușa. Am stat într-o barcă lângă mama, tata și frățiorul meu. Tata i-a întins niște bani unui bărbat. Barca era aglomerată. Mămici, tătici, bebeluși și bunici. Ne uitam cu toții la valuri. Auzeam tânguieli și plânsete. Noaptea era rece și bătea vântul. Mirosea a motorină și pește se simțea în toată barca. Bărbatul purta o șapcă de baseball. A demarat cu echipajul. M-a lovit ca un ciocan în inimă. Salvarea! Întreaga barcă s-a dezechilibrat odată cu salvarea. M-am ținut cu unghiile. Niște bărbați au sărit în mare. Cineva a strigat la mine. Ai murit sau trăiești? Luna dispăruse și fratele meu dispăruse. Eram mort. Dar ei m-au scos din apa mării. Am ajuns acum în țara asta. Foarte bine. Mulțumim pentru poveste. Translation by Ilinca Ferruți, one of the students. Thank you.
Thank you. I can hear the differences of in the tone. You know, the part about the child and the part kind of teacher's comments. Any other responses? Anybody would like to share a thought or so? Barbara, would you like to speak? Rather than typing, we can see you are typing.
I only wanted to ask in a way, I thought this would be a very difficult poem to translate from the point of view of two different tones. You know, and I see that it's doable. It's doable, even though I suppose, even though I don't understand, sadly, Romanian, but I can hear certain elements of Latin-based language, and I believe that it was achieved. I think it had to be more specific in some, you know, she didn't say my brother, like the moon was gone and my brother was gone. She said dead, didn't she? I think. Yes.
Yes,
did anybody comment on how awful it was to translate?
No, it wasn't awful. No, it was good. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you anyway very much.
And Richard first, and Ziba next. Richard, would you like to say add something, or you are muted?
Yes, sorry, I forgot I was muted. I found that poem very, very moving, and I'm going to have to go now, but I'd like to say thank you to everyone who took part, organised this, gave translations. Overall, I found the poems very moving, thought-provoking, and so different. And thank you all very, very much, and hope you all enjoy the rest of the meeting. So all the very best, and bye. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you very much. And hopefully we'll have you again. You know, as we were saying, journeys are still going on. So maybe we'll have the Shona and Arabic languages ready next time. Or maybe other languages. We have got Japanese here, I know, amongst our audience.
Yeah. Yes, great. I shall look forward to that. And again, thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 And Ziba, would you be able to speak now? I know you are able, but just can we hear you now?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, eventually.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy for this. Oh my God, I've tried everything. It was, I don't know what happened. Anyway, I found it. The translation was so wonderful. The talks was unbelievably touching. And thanks to Ambrose, thanks to Monica, thanks to Jan, every one of you, every poet that read, and also Tavengwa, I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name. He did a wonderful translation in Shona language, and the language that Monica used is like a poetry itself. I can hear it for hours and hours without getting tired. It's beautiful. And also the Shona's language. The poem I have translated from this book. I love every poem, and I'm planning to translate some to Farsi. But the one that I have translated to Farsi was the very short poem from Penny Jones. And this poem is about the children. They are sitting together in some, and is the voice of every children. How I connected to this poem is because before I translated one poem from Stephen Watts, my dear translator, wonderful poet, my dear friend. Many years ago, 25 years ago, he did a work in a student for students, children, and from their talking, he made a long poem. It's very strong poem, and this was a shortened. This poem was somehow very close to that poem that I loved and I translated 25 years ago, and also because the name of the poem is What is in a Name? And the names are what we start the poem with. Any name, anything we call it is a word, is something that you can discover for hours. You can think about one word, an hour, more than an hour. A book, you can write a book from one word, sometimes one word. So that is how we connected poetry, and that is how we build up the poetry and go to language with words. So somehow also when I was a small baby, they say God has thousands of names. And these names, we used to just practice repeating these names, that each of them are very powerful. The gods is the most powerful things that we think, everyone thinks of, for example, a child especially. And then you relate it to those words, and that's how the poetry started inside me. For example, when I was 3-year-old, my mom said that we went to another city to my mom's uncle's house, and for the first time I'm meeting my mom's uncle, and they say his name is Rahim. I say Bismillah Rahman Rahim. It's a word that when I was a baby, I heard from my grandmother, and quickly I related his name to some word that I knew and made a sound like poetry. That's how they say her first poem. So I'm reading this poem in Farsi that I have translated, because you got the text in English, and then I will read one poem in English, just my own poem. I translated my own poem to English to you, if there is a time. This one is from Penny Jones. یک نام چه دارد مگر ریم خیلی خسته است انگار پاهایش را ترکش قطع کرده باشد الیاس دعایی به خدا میخواند میپرسد چرا فراس میفهمد میداند که باید شجاع باشد یوری در تاریکی دعا میکند با گریه آرزو میکند صبح از راه برسد در زمان میریزد اشک‌های کاترین با باران شکم آفرین غرغر میکند سیبی به خواهرش میدهد الهام لبخندی میزند گازی به سیب میزند برش میگرداند. This is how it sounds in Farsi, and I will translate some of the poems that tonight was read slowly to Farsi, and hopefully in future I will be able to make one book also from this in Farsi for you in Persian. And this poem I wrote for my translator. I dedicated to my translator that every translated carries something of you. Every translate a poem, they carry part of you. They carry your wounds, your pain, your love, your joy. Those moments, those special, strong moments, they carry it in another language and they carry them with them as well wherever they go. So this is how I look at it. Rather than love, rather than desire, rather than grace and perfection, rather than what got lost between us, miscued from Ramesses, rather than sleep next to my liver, paired with my lumbar, coupled with my artery, under my rib cage, even if I was not there, even if I was no longer be there with you. Keep the literacy of those papers that I did not sleep for under your eyelashes. Thank you so much.
Did you say you are going to read your translation as well? Sorry, you are muted.
Yes, this was the translation I did from my own poem to English.
Could you read the original in Farsi, right?
An original.
Do you have that with you?
Yes, I have it.
Yeah.
سوای عشق، سوای اشتیاق، سوای لطف و اشراف، سوای آنچه بین ما گم شد به گمراه گذشت، سوای خواب ور جگر جفت شاهرگ توی قفسه سینه بر طاق قلب، حتی اگر نبودم دیگر، سواد کاغذهایی را که نخوابیدم زیر پلک نگه دار.
Thank you so much, Ziba. That's very, very powerful. And I will remember what you just said, the translators carry a part of you. So, excellent. I don't know how we will pass our scheduled time. I'm not sure either we could just end here and maybe carry on with the journey next time, or I still want to go back to Ambrose's poem, and I know we got Romanian translation and we've got Hebrew translation here, maybe Farsi as well. So how would you like to proceed, Ambrose?
Maybe we hear one more translation from Tavengwa, and then we hear if any of the people who translated that, who did that translation exercise, are still here, if they can share, and then maybe we end there.
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry, Ambrose, I did not quite hear you.
Maybe if you've got a translation, maybe if you've got another translation that's ready, you could read that maybe Barbara's or Laila's, and then
I think I'll just start with a recap on Zeba's translation of Penny Jones, which is actually another short poem that touched me with that shortness and the rhythm. And it's actually draws out feelings from someone. Like, okay, let me start by reading it, then I will explain how the poem touched me. It's by Penny Jones. What's in a name? Zita ndo Renee. Rim arukutika makumbo ake akweta sempembe. Elias anonyengetera kumusiki. Anobvinza kuti sei. Firas anonzwisisa. Anofanira kushinga. Yuri anochema murima. Achinamatira mabakwenzi. Misodzi yagadhi iri kudonerana nemvura yekunaya. Ephraim anosvitsa hanzvadzisikana yake Apple. Dumbu rake roti kururu. Elam anonyemwerera. Oriruma nekumudzorera. That's my translation for that.
I don't understand the Shona, but somehow I sense that a little bit of playfulness there. I don't know if I'm right.
Actually, there is noisy, but why? Can you come again, actually?
Okay, maybe Eva or Barbara, would you like to read your translation of Ambrose's poem? I remember, Barbara, you've got one in Hebrew, right?
Yeah, yeah, it's quite quick.
Yeah, Hebrew, we haven't featured the Hebrew today yet, so let's go for the Hebrew now, maybe first.
Okay, so it's a beautiful little poem. So, Adam asher ratz derech haminhaha, כששמעתי איך הוא רץ, חוצה יבשות, עובר נהרות, דרך יערות, דרך מדבריות ודרך מנהרות. איך יכולתי להיכשל לקבל השעה?
Yeah, you can hear the sound is still there, the movement is still there. I don't understand the Hebrew, of course, but you can hear it. Excellent.
Hebrew is luckier in a way than English because the masculine endings all sound the plural endings masculine all sound the same. The feminine endings all sound the same, and so there's a rhyme.
Yeah.
Which is kind of lucky, you know. Yeah. The ot, that's a feminine plural ending.
Oh, good. Yeah. So, Ziba, do you want to read your translation in Farsi? If you have it, but don't worry if you haven't got it. You're muted.
Which translation? Which one?
Oh, sorry, it's Ambrose one. We started from there.
I will in future. I haven't translated.
Okay, sure. Yeah. Another time. Maybe Monica. Have you got yours? I remember sure. You've got yours, right?
Sure. Omul care alerga prin tunel. Când am auzit cum a alergat pe continente, peste râuri, prin păduri, prin deșerturi și prin tuneluri, cum să nu mă inspire?
Excellent. Yeah.
And I noticed that we also have some plurals that rhyme because these words happen to have the same plural. Okay.
Yeah. So sometimes it's lucky, sometimes it's skill, sometimes it's art. Okay, maybe a combination of these. So anything else we would like to end with? Ambrose, please.
I don't know. Does anyone want to say anything, comment on anything, and then we end shortly after that?
And can I ask, are these translated books raising money for refugees?
That's the idea. For example, the Italian translation, the Italian edition, is being sold to raise funds for a group in Italy, and also another one that's based in the UK, and one that conducts search and rescue operations, especially around Europe. Monica's translation, the Romanian translation, is also doing the same. There is one group that is based in Romania, another group that is based in the UK, and another that's also doing search and rescue operations. So with all the editions, we'll try to do exactly what, or more or less the same as what Overland Oversea did, which is being sold to raise funds for Doctors Without Borders, Leicester City of Sanctuary, and also the Nottingham and Nottinghamshire Refugee Forum. So that's the idea. What made the publication tricky is that both the Italian and the Romanian editions came out during a pandemic, when the normal ways in which poets sell books were restricted. There were no poetry readings, there were no gatherings, physical gatherings, and we have to rely on word of mouth. We have to rely on forums like this. Hopefully, as more translations come, we'll have like a whole catalog that we can promote, and through that, hopefully also raise a bit more for different groups that are supporting refugees and people on the move. The other idea that we are also working on is, creating more spaces like this, where poets and translators, and also the organizations that we are raising funds for, can meet and talk and share experiences, share ideas, find out how we can support each other better, more. So it's really a work in progress, and it will be interesting to see where we are, let's say 5 years from now, or we are in 2023. Let's see what happens in 2025 when Overland Oversea celebrates its 10th anniversary. So yeah, we just keep doing what we can.
Okay, on this note, with the expectation of 10th anniversary in 2 years' time, we'll end this event. Perhaps there might be something else, in between these 2 years, a small event or something like this, but 2025, maybe make it a bit more celebratory, bigger event at that time. All right, thank you so much for your participation and the contribution, and maybe see you next time.